All right, let's do this, Ravens fans. We're going deep on the Ravens offseason. You sent over some reports from the Ravens official website. And, well, things are getting spicy roster moves, salary cap stuff, and maybe even some draft day surprises.
Yeah, the Ravens have some big choices to make. They've got this core group of young players. They're building around them, but there are some tough decisions coming up.
For sure. So first up, the Ravens have to make a decision on those fifth-year options for Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum. May 2nd is the deadline TikTok, right? They're both from the 2022 draft, and they've already done some amazing things.
Yeah.
So what's the strategy here?
Fifth-year options are interesting. You get to keep a first-round pick for another year. But for guys who are already doing so well, like Hamilton and Linderbaum, the price goes way up. We're talking $18.6 million for Hamilton in 2026, and Linderbaum, $23.4 million.
Wow, that's a lot of money. So keeping these young stars is going to cost them.
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting with Linderbaum. Picking up his fifth-year option is almost the same as using the franchise tag on him the next year. So the Ravens are basically deciding between locking him in now or maybe waiting a bit.
I see what you mean. But didn't their GM, Eric DaCosta, talk about keeping the draft strong even with big contracts? How do these options fit into that?
That's the big question. DaCosta wants to keep that window of contention open. That means drafting well and still having money for those big contracts for guys like Lamar Jackson. These fifth-year option decisions are like a smaller version of that bigger problem.
So trying to do it all, keep the young talent and stay flexible with money, not easy.
Nope. And then there's our Darius Washington. He's a restricted free agent, which adds another layer of complexity.
Okay, help me out here. What's restricted free agency and what can the Ravens do with Washington?
It gives the Ravens some control over Washington's future. They could use a second-round tender on him. It pretty much guarantees he stays. But that would cost them $5.346 million.
Option 1 is expensive, but safe. What else could they do?
They could try the right of first refusal tender. It's cheaper at $3.263 million, but riskier. Another team could offer Washington a contract, and the Ravens would have to match it or let him go.
So pay a lot for certainty or take a chance? What's the best case scenario?
A contract extension. They could lock him in for the long term, secure a key player on defense, and have a better idea of their costs. But that might be tough, especially with the news that just came out.
You mean that report about Marcus Williams, the starting safety? Maybe leaving? That was a surprise.
Yeah, it really changes things for the safety position. If Williams leaves, keeping Washington becomes even more important, and their draft strategy might change too.
Hold on, Williams has 20 interceptions in his career. You don't just let a guy like that walk away easily, do you?
You're right, he's a proven player. But maybe the Ravens are thinking about other positions. Maybe they want someone younger and less expensive at safety. It's all speculation, but it's definitely interesting.
So where does that leave the Ravens for the draft? They might need to fill some spots, especially at safety and wide receiver, right?
Absolutely. And the draft is where it gets really exciting. They've got some tough choices to make, especially if Williams does end up leaving.
All right, so the draft. It's like the NFL's treasure hunt, right? You're looking for those hidden gems, those players that can make a real difference. The Ravens have always been good at finding talent, especially in those later rounds. What's their secret?
Well, they have a system. They know what they're looking for. They understand their needs and the kind of players that fit their team. And they aren't afraid to make big moves. Remember when they traded up to get Lamar Jackson?
Oh, yeah, that was a huge moment. But they're not always making those big swings. They're strategic. They have a way of ranking players, looking at all sorts of factors. So with all that in mind, what are the biggest needs they need to fill in this draft?
We've already talked about safety and wide receiver. Those are definitely at the top of the list, especially with the whole Marcus Williams situation. But they could also use some help on the offensive line and maybe some more depth at cornerback.
Right, that makes sense. So let's talk about some names. Who are some of the top prospects they might be looking at?
Well, at safety, there's Nick Emenwari from South Carolina. He had an amazing combine, great athlete, good size. He really stood out. And then there's Malachi Starks from Georgia. He's a ball hawk. He's got a knack for getting those interceptions.
So if they need a playmaker on defense, Starks sounds like he could be their guy. What about on offense?
This year's wide receiver class is really deep. There's Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State. He's an amazing route runner with incredible hands. Quentin Johnston from TCU. He's big and physical. He can win those jump balls. And then there's Jordan Addison from USC. He's super fast, and he knows how to find the end zone. Any of those guys could be a huge addition to the Ravens' offense.
Wow, so many talented players to choose from. But with Lamar Jackson's contract situation still uncertain, do you think they might draft a quarterback?
I don't think they'll draft a quarterback early in the draft. Their focus is on building around Lamar and giving him what he needs to succeed. Maybe they'll pick up a quarterback in the later rounds, someone to develop. But their priority is clear. They want to help Lamar be the best he can be.
Makes sense. They've invested a lot in Lamar. It's all about giving him the right pieces around him. Speaking of investments, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the salary cap. How much room do the Ravens have to make moves this offseason?
It's tricky. They're projected to have about $40 million in cap space. Which sounds like a lot, but they have a lot of free agents to make decisions on.
So they're walking a tightrope, trying to keep their core players and still have enough money to bring in new talent.
Exactly. And it's not just about this year's cap. They have to think about the future. Every big contract they sign now could limit what they can do later on.
It's like a game of chess. They have to plan ahead.
Exactly. And that's what makes the offseason so interesting. Building a championship team isn't just about making big moves. It's about making smart decisions that set the team up for success in the long run.
Speaking of contenders, let's talk about the team itself. What are the Ravens' biggest strengths right now, and what are the areas where they could improve?
Their defense is their strongest point. They have a young and talented secondary, a strong pass rush, and a solid linebacking group led by Roquan Smith. It's a recipe for a dominant defense.
Roquan Smith is a beast, no doubt. But what about the offense? We've talked a lot about the need for more receivers.
Yeah, that's the missing piece. They have Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews. But adding another reliable receiver would make a big difference. It would take some pressure off Lamar and make that offense even more dangerous.
And they have a new offensive coordinator in Todd Monken. He's known for his aggressive passing schemes. Could be fun to watch.
Definitely Monken's style, combined with Lamar's unique abilities, could be a nightmare for opposing defenses. But it's all about finding the right balance, letting Lamar be creative, but within a system that helps him succeed.
So finding the right pieces and putting them together in the right way, creating an offense that works for Lamar.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between Lamar's improvisational skills and a structured offense that allows him to thrive.
Okay, we've talked draft, salary cap, and the current roster. What's next on our deep dive?
Let's focus on some of the key players, the ones whose decisions could have a big impact on the Ravens season.
Sounds good. Who's first on our list?
Let's start with Marcus Peters, the veteran cornerback. He's coming back from an injury and he's entering the last year of his contract.
Peters is a playmaker. He gets interceptions. But he's also 30 years old and recovering from a serious injury. Do you think the Ravens will bring him back?
It's a tough one. They could offer him a short-term extension, hoping he comes back strong and provides leadership. Or they could decide to move on with Manchin. Draft someone to replace him and get younger at that position.
It's a risk either way. Do they bet on Peters returning to his old form, or do they go with someone younger and maybe cheaper?
Exactly. And it's not just Peters. They have other veterans with expiring contracts like Calais Campbell, Justin Houston, and Chuck Clark. They have some big decisions to make.
So it's all about finding that balance, experience versus youth, and of course staying under the salary cap. Not an easy job.
It's what separates the good teams from the great teams. The Ravens have a winning culture, but how they handle this offseason will be crucial to their continued success.
All right, we've covered a lot today. We've looked at the Ravens' draft strategy, their salary cap, their strengths and weaknesses, and some of the key decisions they face with their veteran players, but we're not done yet.
Right. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the trends that are shaping the NFL, and how they might impact the Ravens' future.
All right, we're back for the final part of our Ravens deep dive. We've talked about their offseason moves, looked at the draft, and even focused on some key players. But now let's zoom out. What are the big things happening in the NFL right now, and how do the Ravens fit into all of this?
One of the biggest things is just how much offense we're seeing across the league. Quarterbacks are throwing the ball more than ever. Wide receivers are putting up crazy numbers.
Yeah.
It's like an arms race on offense.
Yeah, it seems like every team wants that explosive wide receiver, the one who can take over a game.
Yeah. And that's definitely something the Ravens have to think about, especially with their need for more offensive weapons.
Do you think they might go all in on a top wide receiver in the draft, even if it means they're weaker at other positions?
It's risky, but it might be the right move. Maybe they think the best way to compete with the best offenses in the AFC is to give Lamar Jackson that elite receiver he needs, someone who can really open up the field.
It's a high-risk, high-reward kind of strategy, but if they find the right guy, it could be huge.
For sure. And it's not just about wide receivers. We're also seeing a shift toward quarterbacks who can run, the kind of quarterbacks who can make plays with their legs.
Well, the Ravens already have that with Lamar Jackson. He's electric when he runs with the ball.
Exactly. Lamar's skills give them a real advantage in today's NFL, but they need to build the right system around him, an offense that lets him use his strengths and make those big plays.
So it's not just about having the right players, it's about using them the right way. Building an offense that works for Lamar.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between Lamar's ability to improvise and a structured offense that helps him succeed.
Okay, we've talked about the big NFL trends, but let's get back to the Ravens competition. What's your prediction for the AFC North this season?
The AFC North is always tough, and this year will be no different. The Bengals were just in the Super Bowl. The Browns have Deshaun Watson back. And the Steelers, well, they're the Steelers. They always find a way to compete.
It's going to be a battle. So how do the Ravens stack up against their rivals?
I think they're right there with them. They have a great defense, a dynamic quarterback, and a coaching staff that knows how to win in this division.
But they'll need to stay healthy, and they need to make some smart moves in the offseason if they want to win the division.
Absolutely. It's going to be close. Every game will matter.
Well, I can't wait to see what happens. It's going to be another exciting season in the AFC North.
I agree. That division always delivers some great football.
Okay, we've covered a lot today. We've talked about the Ravens' offseason moves, their draft strategy, the big NFL trends, and the AFC North. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Oh, I like that. What are you thinking?
We've talked a lot about the strategy, the salary cap, the draft picks, all the moves. But in the end, what really matters is the players on the field and their desire to win.
I completely agree. The Ravens have a lot of talented players, but it's their mindset, their leadership that will determine how far they go.
Exactly. And that's something you can't really measure. It's intangible,
Yeah.
but it's so important for any team that wants to win a championship.
So to our listeners, as you follow the Ravens this offseason and into the new season, pay attention to more than just the moves they make. Pay attention to the heart of this team, their leadership, their resilience, their determination, because those things will determine whether they can win the AFC North and make a run at the Super Bowl.
That's a great point. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the Baltimore Ravens. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.